Hi everyone, welcome back to Vinod. Like I said last video, this video I want to talk about what is happening in AI sphere. AI, like I said, has been fueling the growth which we have been seeing. Thanks to AI, our global economy seems to be standing on two legs, only two legs. Before we had many legs, like a centipede, and that gave us a lot of confidence. Now, instead of a centipede, we have become a human with just two legs. So AI seems to be that which is holding us up. If you see the American market and the global market leans on the American market, it's being held up by AI, and this is all thanks to what happened with OpenAI. And we will talk about that in the next video about OpenAI specifically and circle of competence, like I said. But before we get into that, let me first lay out where we are right now before we talk about what happened. So where we are right now is all the profits and all the what you call revenue which we have seen, the growth we have seen is being centered around NVIDIA and the American tech companies in the United States. And this would have been all great news if this had happened way back in, let's say, 2008, 2009 climate globally, because we were in an era where we were talking about free trade, opening border, becoming borderless, that people should move more freely everywhere around the world. Even China and the US were in a much better terms than they are right now, and things were looking very different. So if it had happened at that point of time, this conversation which I'm having with you would be very different. But the climate right now is free trade has come down, walls are back up, people cannot move so freely anymore, and the fear about traveling itself is palpable now. Can't even imagine that, going to the United States, even on a work visa, like what happened to the Hyundai factory, the workers, it's gut-wrenching. It's come out to light now that most of them, or probably all of them, were legally there. They had the right visas, requisite visas. They were allowed to do what they were doing there, and none of them had broken any law of any shape or form. Most of them are traumatized beyond belief, and they've all returned back to Korea except one. And they've had such a traumatic experience, some of them are even having PTSD. So now that comes into the news. This would immediately scare anybody in their right frame of mind to traveling, and that to the United States. And if you have to travel, I'm not talking about leisure here, you need to travel there on work. Your company is sending you there on work. You need to go meet a few business heads and do a presentation. You would be feeling rightfully very scared to do that. That is the climate we are living in now. So that factored in with this AI and our investments, we have to learn to look at it with a different lens. This is why I said, when Anand was repeatedly saying AI is a blessing, it's going to be there for part of our ecosystem here on. It's not going to go anywhere. We're all going to be using more and more AI. That is all very true. What remains the question is, which are the companies which are going to be left 50 years from now, 20 years from now? I'm not talking about 100 years, because I won't be around here for 100 years. Most of you will not be there for 100 years. So let's talk about just in our window, maybe 20 to 40 years window, which are the companies which are going to be the ones hanging around, creating value, creating returns for us as investors. And that is where it kind of gets very foggy and it's very difficult to see. Case in point, the example of NVIDIA. NVIDIA was the poster child of AI, right? It has been the one which is, if you take the chart, it looks like a log E chart and just goes way up. If you take the entire stretch of the chart from since the inception of the company where it was being traded, the last 2 years, it's been astronomical, the growth. And we've been saying there's a bubble. And the reason for that bubble is, if you project the earnings of NVIDIA, the sales it has to generate to justify the revenue and the earnings, every single person on this planet would require an NVIDIA chip to be used. That is where we were, not about where we need to be, right? So this future earning potential of AI and NVIDIA chips is what market is factoring in, and they feel it justifies this price to be at where we are pushing it to. And a big part of NVIDIA's domination comes from the fact that China is one of their largest marketplace, and they've been trying to supply chips into China. Now Trump got elected, fear of national security, whatever, geopolitical tension, I don't know that. I'm not an expert in if this can be used for spying or not can be used for spying. I leave that up to the experts. But because he's gotten elected and the trade tensions and the tariffs, what has led to, it's led to a weakening of trust between nations and countries. And now China has a big question mark on NVIDIA. The reason why China having a big question mark on NVIDIA is a big problem for NVIDIA is because of this lack of trust between China and the United States. The Chinese, the way they work and their functioning of government is very different from what happens in India and the US. They're not a functioning democracy. So when the party decides, we need to go in a certain direction, the rest of the nation, rest of the populace has no option but to go down that road. There is no voice of can we decide, can we vote on this, can we debate this, none of that. If the party elders decide, no, this is for the future of the country, we need to go in this direction, everybody is given the marching order. And that is what has led to some serious fragility in US tech dominance now. Because till this point of time, most of these AI chips was NVIDIA designed, made by a few companies. But the Chinese have said, no, you know what, we don't want to be beholden to this. We will create our own companies, create our own AI chips. First, we were all laughing about it, saying, no, this is not possible. This requires a lot of R&D, research, this, that. But then their AI softwares came out, DeepSeek and the rest of it. And we have been seeing more and more AI, homegrown AI coming out of China, which is showing that even with slower, weaker chips, they're able to deliver the same amount of competence as OpenAI and ChatGPT. And now they're creating their own hardware layer. And the government has mandated that the companies within China should not buy, NVIDIA chips, these special NVIDIA chips which were made and designed for China, which the American government said okay to, as long as NVIDIA pays them 15%, bonus for selling those chips. So China has turned around and said, no, we don't need this. So this has led to a 3% drop in NVIDIA, and the Nasdaq fell by 0.5%, and even the S&P 500 dipped by 0.1%. Now the question begs, if this continues, what we're going to have is, we're not going to have a centered, domination of AI and AI chips and AI technology. It's getting fractured, and it's fracturing rapidly. And the amount of influence the Chinese have in other regions of the world, right? The amount of influence they have managed to capture in Africa, in Asia. Even now, India and China have become friends thanks to what Trump has done to us with tariffs. We have opened the door to China, and after 7-year hiatus, we are now visiting China. Our business partners from India are now booking flights. Flights are all open. Business visas are open. Chock loads of Indian businessmen are going there and trying to sign deals. If that is the case, there is a shift in the balance when it comes to technology and AI dominance of NVIDIA. So this is what Anand was saying. So I would like you to think about what I'm saying. So I feel this fracturing is going to lead to more regional companies and domination from regional players, boosting local chip production even in India and in China and other places. So overall, it's great for consumers and for humanity. The more players there are in an ecosystem or an industry, because that means there will be more innovation, there will be more democratization, prices will be fairer, instead of monopoly happening, like in the case of NVIDIA. But the flip side is, as an investor, when you're investing, when you have many more horses in the race, it's as it is hard to bet on a race when there's only 2-3 horses. We struggle, right? Now you opened up the door, and now you have private sector, private equity, now governments playing, everybody jumping onto this. Where the money should be placed and how gets into a big question, because it is very hard to see. And if it's not in your circle of competence, like for most investors it's not in our circle of competence, it is better to be careful and wait and watch, what I would say. This is just on the AI and AI bubble is what I wanted to talk about. The next video, I will get into what I said, circle of competence, why it is important to understand this. Because a lot of you might be like, Vinod, you know nothing about AI, man, so why are you going off faffing about it? Fair enough. So I will take a case study of someone who had all the expertise and who was in the know, who had all the knowledge, and how they muffed it. So show you, even if you know what you're doing, you can really make a wrong bet on AI, and it can hurt you, really hurt you as much as $40-50 billion. That is the next video when I talk about that. So keep an eye out that for tomorrow. And in the last video, I'll try and conclude by answering some of the questions you guys had in the previous videos. Of course, I will answer this series of videos questions later on next week when I'm with Sadhu again. But this Sunday's video will be a Q&A, which I'll try and answer all the stuff about gold and bitcoins. Anyway, thanks for being with me today. I hope you had a wonderful day and wish you a wonderful evening. See you again tomorrow where we talk about the circle of competence. Thank you.